And welcome back to another Ableton tutorial, or if this is your first time here, then a big welcome to you. A big shout out to everyone liking, commenting, subscribing on YouTube, and a huge, massive thank you to these awesome folks supporting over on Patreon who really help me keep making and sharing this kind of content. Right, so what are we looking at today? Well, you can hear all the texture that's going on behind you. I wanted to take a look at, how to turn interesting sounds into interesting unfolding textures like you can hear. Maybe you found a sound at home that you like, the sound of a kitchen pot, or, perhaps a lampshade or something, or you've been out walking and, a particular fence sounded interesting to you, and so you've made a recording of it. How to turn that into the sort of thing that you can hear happening behind you. So I'm going to press stop on that. So a little while ago, I made this instrument. You can see and hear it playing in the background right now, just some metal pipes that I thought sounded really nice. And so I made some recordings of those pipes. You can see there's 5 pipes. I made 5 recordings of one note, of the next note, another note, and another note, and another note. And you can hear that those are absolutely not in tune, not in any kind of scale that we might recognize, but I really like the sound, so I made some recordings. When I make recordings like this, I like to make 8 individual hits. I find that this means that when we randomize which of these individual hits is being triggered, we get enough variation that it feels like really, really live. If we're just using one hit, then often it can sound a bit static, and I think for me, some of the interest in this, using these organic sounds as starting points means that we can make it feel human, make it feel alive. And of course, as humans, every time we try and do something, no matter how much we try and make it the same, it sounds a bit different timing wise, a bit different with the strength that we hit the thing or play the thing or whatever it is. So let's imagine you've made some recordings or made a recording of a sound that you really like. What are we going to do? How are we going to turn it into this kind of unfolding texture that has so much nuance and interest to it? Patreon members can download this entire set, including all of these samples, and that is all Patreon members, including free Patreon members. So if you haven't signed up and you've been thinking about maybe doing so, you could do so for free and grab this set and grab these samples and get making and follow along exactly what I'm going to do today. Right, let's get stuck into it. Again, I'm going to start with a drum rack. I've been doing so much stuff inside of drum racks, and I'm really enjoying exploring the sort of creative possibilities, but also the creative constraints of that. So I'm going to start and I'm going to bring in a drum rack. I'm just going to use notes 1, 3, and 5 from this. I'm not going to worry about notes 2 and 4 because I think that they're going to be a little bit clashing with what I have in mind. You can try your own thing. You can see what happens if you include all the notes, but we're just going to drag in note number 1 into note C1 on our drum rack. I'm going to slice that according to transient and just bring the sensitivity down a little bit so we just have the individual slices. Really nice. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is make it so it randomly selects one of these slices each time I trigger a note. So at the moment, this is triggering C3, and the slice C3 is way off the end here. It's not getting triggered. So first of all, we need to bring that note down to be C1. So it's going to trigger this slice. So I'm going to bring in a MIDI effect pitch. I'm going to drag that in here, and I'm going to put that down 2 octaves, shift and press down, shift and down. And now we're triggering it. Why is it not playing? We have to sort of move this just very slightly over there. And there we have it. Now it's playing that first slice every time I trigger that note. Cool. Let's make it randomly select a slice. So let's bring in a random here. And this random is, of course, changing the pitch of the MIDI note, but the pitch of the note is not controlling the transposition of the instrument. It's just controlling which slice is being triggered when we use simpler in slice mode. So I have an option of the original and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 extra slices. So I'm going to change the choices to 7. I'm going to put the chance at 100%. And now every time I trigger one of these notes, it's going to play a different slice. And you can see that moving around on the simpler there. I also wanted to keep playing the previous slice, so I'm going to turn the playback to be poly. So now if it's playing a previous slice, that's going to continue to ring out, and we're going to get these lovely sort of beating interferences that you can hear from these metal pipes. I'm also going to come to controls and just random pan, sort of maybe about 20%, 18, 19, 19%. That will do. Super nice. I'm going to come back to this view here. I'm going to turn on the filter. I'm going to already group this. I'm going to select it with the pitch device and the thing. I'm going to press Command G, and I'm going to right click on the frequency and map that to macro 1. And I think this is actually going to sound really nice pitched down an octave. So I'm going to click on transpose and press shift and down again. And now we're going to get some much lower notes. Lovely. Really nice. So we can hear those notes ringing out and being randomly panned. Super nice. Okay, what else do I want to macro right now? Perhaps fade in. I'm going to right click on that, map that to macro 2, and I think I'm going to leave that for any mapping right now. Okay, so I want sometimes this to play back at this octave. Perhaps it's also interesting for it to sometimes play an octave below and sometimes play an octave above. So I'm going to group all of these things, not including the instrument rack. I'm going to press Command G. So I now have a new instrument rack made. I'm going to duplicate that, Command D. And on this bottom one, I'm going to make this go down another octave. And I'm going to call that Note 1 down, and I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to make this at the original pitch. So let's call it Note 1 up. Now, what I think is going to be really nice is if sort of half the time it plays this note, which is I'm going to call it the main one, but it's actually the octave down one. But half the time it plays this one, and then a quarter of the time it plays a note up, and a quarter of the time it plays the note down. So I'm going to open up the chain selector here, and I'm going to make this one go for 2. So we need to go from 0 to 1. I'm going to make this one go for 1, so that's going to be on number 2 there, and I'm going to make this one go also for 1, and that's going to be on 3 there. Now, I'm going to right-click that and map the chain select. I'm going to map it to macro 8, actually. I'm going to leave some of these free. Okay, so I can now use the chain selector to move through the notes. We see that when I move the chain selector here, it's going all the way up, like way up high. I want to constrain that range. I want that to only go from 0 to 3. So I'm going to click on map here. We're going to make that only go from 0 to 3 like that. And in order to make this sort of randomization where half the time it's this and a quarter of the time it's this, a quarter of the time it's this, we're going to use an expression control. So MIDI effects, expression control, we're going to bring that in here, inside this instrument rack. Exactly. Is that what I want that to do? Yes, that's going to be really nice. Okay, going to change this to random. Going to change the randomization to 100% logarithmic and make this go 100%. And now I can map that to the chain selector here. So now every time I trigger this note, let's minimize some of these things so we can see it. We can see the chain selector moving here, and sometimes we're getting yeah, this is a really, really nice selection of notes. I'm going to rename this Note 1 chain selector. Note 1 selector. Let's just do that. Note 1 selector! Right. I'm now going to repeat this process for the other two notes, Note 3 and Note 5. And in fact, because I want to keep these mappings, the filter frequency and the fade-in mapping, I'm just going to actually duplicate this, and I'm going to just drag in the samples. So let's double-click this. Let's double-click this. For now, we can shut this chain selector. I'm going to drag in Note 3 into here. Let's bring the sensitivity down. Lovely. And that's going to be... Also, we need to put that down an octave, and we can see that the mapping is already done, and of course the random panning is already there as well, so that's going to be the same. Let's rename this Note 3. Let's duplicate that. Let's put this bottom one down another octave. Lovely. And let's call that Note 3 down, and let's duplicate that. Command D, and let's put that one back at this pitch, and let's call that Note 3 up. Now, let's open up the chain selectors again, because I want it to also be choosing between the notes as well as between the octaves. So I need to move this Note 3 out to here, and I need to make that too long. I need to move this one out to here, and I need to move this one out to here. Same again for the last note. I'm going to Command D, duplicate that, drag in Note 5 into here. Let's bring down the transient sensitivity like that. Lovely. Let's just zoom in here and make sure, yeah, exactly, that same thing has happened. I wonder if that's happened on the other notes as well. Let's just check that in on Note 3. No, it hasn't happened. We didn't need to fix that on Note 3. Okay, so this is Note 5. Duplicate that. Put this one down an octave. So we come over here, we go, oh no, the main one needs to be down an octave. So we come back here and put this one down an octave. And now this one needs to go down 2 octaves, shift down, down, and then this one duplicate, and let's put that one back at this one. Lovely. And let's rename these, and let's rename this. Okay, now we need to adjust these note 5 chain selectors. So let's make that go like that, and let's put that on that, and let's put that on that. And in order for this chain selector to now move through all of these options, we need to change the mapping range here. So let's come to the mapping range, and we need to make it go to number 11. So we come in here, and what was previously 0 to 3, we now make it 0 to 11. So now we have a situation where every time I trigger this bells, let's call it bells, it's going to randomly select one of these 9 options. It's going to play note 1, or note 1 down, note 1 up, note 3, note 3 down, and etc. So let's see what that sounds like. Oh, this is really nice. Yeah, super nice. Okay, now we also have these things mapped over here, the filter frequency and the fade in. So let's use this expression control to do some stuff with there. So let's maybe randomize the fade in. So let's come here to pressure. Let's change that to random. Let's make random 100%. Let's make it logarithmic, and let's map that to the fade in here. Yeah. Really nice. Let's already perhaps just give it a little bit, so it's... Yeah. Super nice, and the way these bells are so super resonant is really nice. Perhaps it's nice to also do something with the filter. Or perhaps it's nice to connect the filter to the velocity, so we could come in here in the controls and turn velocity to filter. Let's make that 79. Let's copy that value to all siblings. And then we could sort of maybe even randomize the velocity in here. So we could come in here with a velocity. So every time it receives a new note, it's going to randomize the velocity of that note. And then we're going to get some filter cutoff happening. Yeah, this is really nice. Already so many interesting textures happening there. Right, I'm going to make a MIDI clip and make that trigger. So I'm just going to double click here. We've got one MIDI clip. I'm going to make that actually 2 bars long. So we open up the clip here. Length, we're going to make it 2 bars. And let's just make that trigger. Something double click in there. And let's make that not happen all the time, but maybe like 80% of the time. So now let's press play. Lovely. Now that's going to give me another trigger. Nice. Super nice. Okay, cool. Okay, our bells are doing some super nice stuff now, some super nice variations just from these 3 notes that we had. So now let's create some textures and some layers on top of this. So first of all, let's start with granulator. Been doing this a bit recently. Let's bring this granulator in here. We're going to tell it to listen to those bells. So we're going to turn on the in out. We're going to come to output drum rack 6. We're going to tell it to listen to bells post effects. So now every time I press capture, it's going to capture the previous 2 seconds of whatever came out of this bells rack over here. Super nice. Let's make it recapture every time the granulator is captured. So we're going to do that with an envelope MIDI. We're going to go to MIDI effects. We're going to drag in an envelope MIDI in front of this. We're going to change some things. I've done this a bunch, which are release down, sustain up, velocity off, attack down, change this to remote. Now we map this to capture. So now every time the granulator is triggered, it's recapturing the sound, which is really nice. I've saved this as a preset, so I'm going to use the preset that I've done, that I've saved, because I'm going to use this envelope MIDI sort of trigger situation later on in this video. If you want to do that, you just rename it whatever you want and drag it into your user library here, and then you can save your own presets there. Right. So let's do some other stuff here. Let's put in a note. Let's put in a note for the granulator, and let's do that something like this. And now we can see it's captured the previous 2 seconds, and it's doing some stuff. Let's turn off the bells so we can just hear the granulator and hear what it's doing. Yeah, really nice. Okay, let's turn this to cloud mode. Yeah, cool. Let's add a bunch of variation. Let's turn the spread up. Just give it a little bit of stereo information. And let's actually put this up an octave. Yeah, let's add some attack and some release. Yeah, this is nice. We could now go super deep on here and do a bunch of stuff with like the position and the grain size, but I'm actually just really liking this already. I'm really liking what it's doing straight out the box. You could go much deeper on this. I'm just going to leave it at that for now. So this is super nice. Right, let's come in here. Let's turn that off. Let's press O. So that's not going to happen. Let's create another layer. So let's turn the bells back on. And I think perhaps doing something with a pitch hack is going to be really nice. So I'm going to go to audio effects. I'm going to bring in a pitch hack. And I'm going to drag that onto E1 here. I'm going to bring a utility in at the end of this chain and turn it all the way down, because I'm now going to tell this to listen to something, and I'm going to tell it to listen to the bells, and we don't want bells on bells on bells. So now let's use a compressor to do this. Let's bring in a compressor, bring you in here. We're going to turn on the external input. We're going to make sure the audition is activated here, and we're going to select the source to be the bells. So now this pitch hack is receiving that bells sound, but we're not hearing anything because the utility is down. So I'm going to turn the bells output off. So now if I turn up this, yeah, we're going to hear that sound. Cool. So let's dial this in a bit. Let's make this 100% wet. Let's make it reverse all of the time, and let's do a little bit of recycling on this. Let's add some transposition. Cool. Okay. Let's make this do a swell so it's not like continually on. Let's maybe bring the recycle down a little bit. So I'm going to use an envelope MIDI for this. So I'm going to bring an envelope MIDI in here, and let's make a note for this. So let's make another note here. We're going to go like this. Yeah, something like that. Going to turn this all the way down for now. So now I can use this envelope MIDI to control this output, because this is receiving a note. We can see it receiving a note. There it is. It received a note. Let's make this unipolar. 50% is what I want, because I only want it going up to 0 dB, not all the way up to 35 dB. I'm going to map this to here. And so now every time it receives a note, you see this following this envelope. So let's just make it a swell. Let's bring the sustain all the way down, attack up and decay up. Yeah, nice. Nice. Maybe even a slightly longer decay. Let's put after this utility. This utility is functioning as kind of like, we've made our own little instrument with this thing, and this is kind of it's functioning as the volume envelope for that instrument. And so maybe we want to do stuff after that, like perhaps a reverb. So let's bring in an audio effect. Let's bring in hybrid reverb after that. Quite a short, I think, yeah, we don't want it going too crazy, just to give it a little bit of context. And let's make this, like, I think quite interesting stereo-wise. So let's group this pitch hack, Command G, open up the chains here, duplicate it, put one left and put one right. And we can already hear that being kind of stereoing, but I think it's going to be interesting to modulate this rate. And let's just do that with an LFO. Let's bring in an audio effect in here. Let's bring in an LFO after this. And let's change this to random. Let's turn the smooth up, I think. And let's just map you to here. And maybe let's bring the range down a bit. Oh, I need to change this to remote perhaps and map you to here. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, let's bring this range so it doesn't quite go so slow. Yeah, let's do the same thing over here on this one. So LFO, going to change this to remote. We're going to map it to here, and let's bring this up to something like 30%. Let's change this to random and turn the smooth all the way up. Yeah, so now we're getting these super different things on each side. Let's actually do a little bit of EQing before it gets to the reverb. Oh, that was nice. What's happening there? Oh, maybe we need to bring the recycle down a bit. Right click, copy value to siblings. Yeah. Yeah, this is nice. Yeah, the recycle was making a little bit of coupler strong when the repeats got quick enough. Cool. Let's add an EQ in before the reverb, and then that'll be it for this sound. So let's bring in, I think, let's do some high pass like this, and then I think also some low pass. Ooh, crunchy. Maybe a bit more on the reverb. Maybe in a bit more. Yeah, nice. Maybe I'm going to make this rate on these LFOs even slightly... Yeah, let's make this like 40%. Then it's never going to get super slow. It's never going to get into those sort of audio rate repeating stuff. Yeah, really nice. Okay, cool. Right, so we have a note that's triggering that. How does it sound with the bells? This is a lovely, let's call this pitchy thing. Cool, let's come in here, let's turn that note off for now. That's 0. Let's do one more. You could of course go crazy on this. I'm just going to do one more. Let's do something spectral. So maybe let's use, I think, spectral time. So I'm going to bring in spectral time in here. We're going to do the same thing immediately. Actually, I'm going to turn off all of these others for now. So we've only got the spectral time, and let's bring in a listen device. So let's use a compressor in here. Let's tell it to listen to that bells sound again. So we're going to go drum rack 6. We're going to choose bells post effects, and now we can hear that sound. Let's turn this up 100% wet. Going to turn the delay off and freeze on. Let's turn the resolution up to ultra, and let's give this some fade in and fade out. I want this to be on retrigger then. Oh, sensitivity needs to be way up. Yeah, let's give it this nice long. Oh, that's kind of intense. Maybe I don't want retrigger to be like this. Maybe I want retrigger to be a sync thing, and let's make it sync like maybe once a bar. Yeah, now we're getting some really nice stuff. Super nice. I think what's going to be nice is if we just turn this freeze on and off though. So let's do that using the trigger. Let's bring in MIDI effects. I'm going to use my trigger. So this is just my preset of the envelope MIDI. And I'm going to map that to here. Really nice. Okay, let's turn these other guys back on. And let's turn these guys back on. And let's make it only do one of these 3 things each time. So let's select them all. Right click, group notes, play 1. Really nice. Super nice. So this is the technique. You can add layers and layers and layers and like have a whole bunch of different things. Like maybe you want 20 or 30 different layers to choose from each time something gets triggered with the bells. I think maybe I want this to happen slightly less often. So let's come in here, bring that chance down a bit. Let's adjust some of these levels. Let's bring the granulator down and bring these things down a bit. So the main sound is still this bell sound. Yeah. There you have it. Super nice to share these things with you. You can, of course, use any sounds you like for this. You don't need to use bell sounds. You're adults. You can make your own decisions. Would love to hear what decisions you're making. Please tag me. I always love hearing stuff that people share, having been inspired by watching a tutorial like this. I'll catch you next time.